Welcome back to Washington Watch. I'm Tony Perkins, your host. The website is tonyperkins.com. All right, a Danish Mask study conducted early in the spring, and the results just released, reports that general mask wearing doesn't offer much protection to those wearing the mask. Now, with 6,000 participants, these results have some significant weight to them, but mask proponents are already dismissing the study. Twitter is also censoring, this is incredible. Twitter is also censoring the information and the conservative voices who share it, like Tom Finn, a friend of mine, president of Judicial Watch. His Twitter account was frozen yesterday by the social media giant after he linked to the study. Joining me now with details of this study, Dr. Andrew Bostom, Associate Professor of Family Medicine at Brown University. Dr. Bostom, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Thanks for having me on, Tony.
So let me just jump right into this. What did this study reveal about the use of masks?
Well, it was a large randomized controlled trial. I mean, ultimately about 4,900 people completed the trial, and all the participants were uninfected. So it wasn't a study of, if you mask infected persons, you make them less likely to spread coronavirus.
Yeah, the reason they didn't do that, there were some ethical issues there. You put somebody who's got the virus, you send them out with a mask.
They wrote a letter about this. They were critical. Before the results were published, the design paper was published, and an exchange of letters took place, and in something called the Danish Medical Journal. And the investigators explained. They said, look, at the time the study was conducted, we felt there were some ethical concerns with you would do the randomization, Tony, on the basis of household. So you have different households, each with an infected person, for example, with coronavirus. And in one household, the infected person would wear a mask and ostensibly reduce the spread to people in his household or her household, and in a controlled, randomized other household, et cetera, the infected person would not be wearing a mask, and they felt that was a difficult study to conduct, and it also raised some ethical concerns at a time when the whole trajectory of the virus was not well known. So they opted to do a very important design on its own of taking people who were carefully screened to make sure they were not infectious. Antibodies were tested, short-term tests of antigen were done, and they were considered to be uninfected. And then they were randomized en masse to wearing a paper surgical mask or not wearing a paper surgical mask, and being followed serially for at least a month after that period of time for infection. And what they found was that the infection rate was essentially identical in both groups, and it was not supportive of mask mandates for the general population. And I must say, Tony, it's real science in the sense that there's rarely dramatic breakthroughs. This study sits on top of a body of evidence from influenza that's 20 years old that is literally identical. There are at least a dozen studies, randomized controlled trials like this in influenza, which have shown exactly the same thing, that there's no benefit of masking. And some of the influenza studies actually did what this study didn't feel comfortable doing. There have been 7 household studies of influenza where you mask the infected person or alone, both parties, the infected and uninfected, or just the uninfected. And in those different designs, none of them have been shown to be positive. So we have to put this evidence, this new evidence for coronavirus, on top of the evidence that's all been null, that's all been negative with influenza. So in that sense, it's very consistent and frankly rather expected.
So, Dr. Bostom, have masks become the adult blanket? I mean, the blankie. You hold on to it; it makes you feel good, and
talisman maybe would that be a better way to describe it? Certainly in the non-healthcare setting. All I'm saying, Tony, is in the non-healthcare setting, when we apply our gold standard evidence, and it's got flaws. Every study has flaws. You don't know how compliant the people are, but it's a real life study. All the evidence has been null when the idea of masking has been subjected to controlled trials. And, maybe there'll be a better mask product or something that'll come up with, but it'll be the same question. Ultimately, it's a Yogi Berra question. He said, in theory, there's no difference between theory and practice, but in practice there is. And that's why we have to do clinical trials.
So, Dr. Bostom, what then is behind these government officials mandating the wearing of mask? If it's not science, what is it?
Well, there have been some experimental studies just to look at how much virus is emitted with or without a mask, and some have suggested that maybe there's a lower bolus of virus that's out there. But again, that's a theoretical consideration that has to be tested in real life populations, and that's exactly what was done before with influenza, and what these excellent Danish investigators just completed with coronavirus. So you can hold up theoretical ideas, but then you have to test them in real life.
Yeah, but you could say, and I don't want to I shouldn't make so light of it, because there's probably value in the mask, and if people want to wear them, let them wear them. Let them wear masks. But to mandate it is another issue, because usually when you mandate something, it's because you know with certainty that this is a good thing or this is a bad thing.
Absolutely, and that is you. Then, so I share your objection to these mandates. Again, we're talking about non-healthcare settings. In healthcare settings, first of all, it's such a tradition now, particularly on respiratory care units, that it would be impossible to change the practice anyway.
Sure.
There are some suggestions that it may not be as great as people think it is, but leave it alone. We're talking about the non-healthcare setting and mandates in people's homes, et cetera, which is just beyond the pale.
Exactly. 100% agree. Dr. Andrew Bostom, thanks so much for taking time to join us this afternoon.
Thank you, Tony. Take care.
All right. Coming up, we'll talk about Thanksgiving and Christmas rules, speaking of mask, being handed down by totalitarian governors. We'll be joined by Tyler O'Neill, senior editor of PJ Media, next here on Washington Watch. Go ahead and take off your mask and stick around. We'll be right back.